There are 8 to 10 million illegals in the country right now on Joe Biden's watch. So what do you do with them? Are you going to deport them all? What's the plan?
You're going to have to deport a lot of them. It's not sustainable. And it's not just South America. It's from Africa, from Asia, from all over the world.
Asia.
Yeah. I mean, from all over the world. From China, there are 28,000 people in the last few months. 28,000. That's what's he doing? Building an army? And they were mostly men, almost all men, from the age of 18 to 25.
I'm told that the Chinese are paying $35,000 a head, $50,000 a head to come to the southern border. Are they being directed by the Communist Party to come here?
I believe so. I believe so. And I believe we're going to have a terrorist attack 100%. 100%.
Wow, that was former President Trump with me last month on Sunday Morning Futures. He was with me back in February warning about the threat of Chinese nationals who've illegally entered the country. Trump doubled down on that warning on the Hugh Hewitt radio show this week, accusing the Chinese Communist Party of using these nationals to build an army from within the United States. Now, in just 1 week, in just one day, rather, this week, nearly 200 Chinese nationals crossed the San Diego border. 22,000 crossed the southern border just since October. Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Richard McCormick, a member of the House Foreign Affairs, Armed Services Committees, and a member of the GOP Doctors Caucus. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. And nice shout out for the Marines there on your shirt. We all love the Marines, and we appreciate their incredible work. But let me get your take on these Chinese nationals here. What is going on?
Well, what's scarier than the people that we know about is the people we don't know about it. Think about it. About almost 2 million people have crossed the border we haven't even identified. Yeah, we have a bunch of Chinese nationals coming across, very concerned. We don't know what their motives are. Certainly, they're paying large amounts of money to get them here. What happens in a communist country that's not known about, that's not directed? This is very concerning. But the people that are getting here and actually paying to evade capture, those 2 million people, whether it be from any part of the world, whether it be from the Middle East, the Far East, from South America, from jails in Venezuela, we have a massive problem, and we are going to have a terrorist attack, and it's going to be on Biden's head.
Well, this is just incredible. I wonder what you can do as an elected official to get ahead of this. I mean, you heard President Trump just saying that he thinks Xi Jinping is creating an army here in the United States. Why?
Well, this narrative that we haven't done anything is false. I mean, H.R. 2 was passed over 9 months ago. It's been sitting on the Senate's desk. They wanted to pass something where they could only allow 5.5 million before we start doing something. I mean, it's ridiculous. This is not a compromise. This is a giveaway on their part. Pass H.R. 2, secure the border, and quite frankly, we don't even need H.R. 2. We have the same laws that Obama had, that Trump had. We can deport them. We can stop them. All Biden has to do is make the right decision to protect this country, which he took an oath to support and defend this sovereign nation against enemies, foreign and domestic. This is his biggest responsibility.
No, he doesn't want to do it. Obviously, he doesn't want to do it. I don't know if it's because he thinks that they're going to ultimately become voters or what. But I wish that you saw the kind of upset that President Biden apparently showed to Bibi Netanyahu yesterday. I wish we would see that kind of strength when he's talking to Xi Jinping. But we never do. He rolls over for Xi Jinping over and over again. So the president spoke with the Israeli prime minister yesterday, and what we know is that he scolded him. He warned that U.S. policy toward Israel could change if the IDF does not do more to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. A White House readout of the call shows Biden told Bibi that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation are unacceptable, as Biden is calling for an immediate ceasefire. In this week's New York primary election, almost 40,000 Democrats reportedly voted blank to protest Biden's stance on this Israeli war. He's basically picking a fight with Bibi Netanyahu in the middle of Netanyahu's fight of his life. Your reaction?
It goes to show you his failed foreign policy in every aspect. He's the weakest president we've probably ever had in foreign policy. The way he withdrew from Afghanistan, I take great offense to that as an Afghani veteran. The way he handles this has no consistency with the United Nations. He didn't do anything with the funding of UNRWA, with people literally paid for by the United Nations, which is mostly the United States, helping Hamas invade Israel. We never talked about defunding them from the president's side. He has no consistency in his foreign policy. He never holds anybody in Gaza or the Palestinians accountable for not releasing hostages. He's not linking any sort of aid packages to that. He's only one-sided. This is totally based on political expediency, and it's not appreciated by people who understand what's really going on.
There's an op-ed in the Journal today, and the title is this: Biden exploits a tragic Israeli mistake. Okay? The Wall Street Journal writes this: we say try because many people who know better, including President Biden, seem to have forgotten that errors are a tragic and inevitable part of war. The president pandered to the anti-Israel faction of his party on Tuesday by harshly condemning Israel, lecturing it, and then blaming it, not Hamas, for the larger humanitarian disaster in Gaza. They write, it's also the worst thing the president could do to free the hostages. So why is he having this public fight with Netanyahu and not even saying anything about the fact that Hamas refuses to release any hostages?
This is exactly what I'm talking about, the inconsistency. He's basically joined the United Nations, who has done nothing but sanction and talk bad about Israel from the very beginning. Every year, it's up to 20 different warnings to Israel and talking bad about Israeli policy, where they never mention anything Hamas does, never talk about Hezbollah, never talk about the Houthis. He's absolutely inconsistent, joining with the United Nations in this globalist push towards anti-Israeli sentiment. It's inconsistent with American policy. They forget that the United Nations is not just anti-Israel, they're anti-American, and they need to be dealt with, not just joined.
Real quick, before you go, Congressman, what is your priority when you get back to Washington? Obviously, the House, the Congress off for the Easter recess. You'll be returning next week. What's the priority one?
Well, I will say, number one, we have to look at the debt. The debt is killing us. It's going to be our biggest payment in the future, in the near future, just the interest on debt. And if we don't get this under control, it will ruin our economy. It will ruin the currency worldwide. It has to be addressed right now. Today, we're going to go jump in honor of the World War II veterans. Get ready for the D-Day jump in Normandy. We have to remember we do have friends overseas. We do need to appreciate the World War II vets before they're all gone. But right now, we need to take care of the debt so we can take care of this great nation in the future.
What does that mean for the Ukraine aid package?
Well, I think anything that needs to be packaged is going to be packaged with debt. Well, we're not going to get debt release. Let's face it. But we need to secure the border. That's our other. Securing the border and debt are two major emergencies in the United States. I hate to be knee-jerk, but if we don't take care of those two things, we are done.
Congressman, thank you. Richard McCormick joining us this morning. We appreciate it, and we will catch up soon.